The December wind screamed across the Montana plains, throwing sharp waves of snow into the air as if the whole world were trying to disappear under white. Ethan Cole leaned forward in his saddle, his coat pulled tight, his face stinging from the frozen air. He had been riding 3 long days from Billings, eager to reach his own warm ranch house, but the storm refused to give him peace. Through the thick snow, a familiar fence line appeared. It belonged to the Lane property. The small farmhouse stood alone against the wild land, smoke rising weakly from the chimney. Ethan had stopped here many times over the years, sharing news with Tom Lane or watering his horse. But something felt different today. A crude wooden sign hung from the gatepost. For sale. Ethan frowned. Tom Lane had poured years of sweat into this land. It was only 160 acres, stubborn and dry. But it held something more valuable than gold in these parts. Water rights to Crystal Creek. Only a few ranches had running water year-round, and everyone knew the railroad coming next spring would fight hard for it. He passed through the gate and rode toward the house. When he reached the porch, the front door opened. Martha Lane stepped outside, her shawl wrapped tight around her thin shoulders. Her face looked pale, tired, older than he remembered. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I wasn't expecting anyone in this weather." Ethan tipped his hat. "Ma'am, I saw the sign. Where's Tom?" The question hung in the cold air. Martha looked toward the window, where a small girl, little Annie, peeked out with wide blue eyes. "Tom passed 2 weeks ago," Martha whispered. "Pneumonia took him fast." The words hit Ethan hard. Tom had been a good man, someone who helped neighbors without needing a reason, someone you could count on. "I'm sorry for your loss," Ethan said gently. "Tom was a fine man." "Just Martha now," she said quietly. "You can put your horse in the barn. Coffee's hot if you need to warm up." Ethan walked toward the barn, noticing things Tom never would have let go. Loose boards on the chicken coop, broken fences, hay stacked carelessly. Inside, the milk cow looked thin. Only 3 horses remained instead of the 6 Tom once kept. This farm was slipping. Martha was slipping. Winter was here. She had a small child. And debts. He knew Tom had taken a loan recently. A widow losing her land was a common story in Montana, and it never ended well. When Ethan entered the house, warm air wrapped around him. Martha poured coffee, her movements steady but tired. Annie sat at the table drawing with a piece of charcoal. "That's a fine horse," Ethan said kindly. "It was Papa's horse," Annie said. "Mr. Crow took her yesterday." Martha stiffened. After Annie went outside, Martha sat across from Ethan. Up close, he saw dark circles under her eyes, saw how her dress hung loose on her thin frame. "Has Silas Crow been here?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "Every day since Tom died. He holds the loan, says I have to pay it in full now that Tom is gone. If I don't, he'll force a sale. He offered to buy the place for half what it's worth. He says the sheriff will throw us out by the end of the month." Tears shone in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "I have $17 to my name, Mr. Cole. My sister in Ohio can't take us in. Annie asks why her papa won't wake up. I don't know what to tell her." Ethan looked into his coffee. He thought about his own ranch. Successful, steady, but empty. He thought about Tom Lane dragging him out of a blizzard years ago, saving his life. "What about the water rights?" Ethan asked. "That's what Crow wants most," Martha said bitterly. "When the railroad comes, whoever controls the creek will be rich." Ethan stared at Tom's picture on the mantel. Martha younger and smiling, Tom proud beside her, baby Annie in her arms. Then the idea hit him. It was risky, wild, foolish, but maybe the only thing that could save her. "There might be a way," he said slowly. Martha looked up, wary. "I won't take charity." "Not charity, a business arrangement." Ethan took a deep breath. "Marry me." The room went silent. Martha stared as if he'd spoken in another language. "I beg your pardon?" "Marry me," Ethan repeated. "If we're legally married, Crow can't force the sale unless I agree. I'll pay off the loan." You keep your home. Annie keeps her life. In return, I get water access during drought years and help running the place." She sat back, trembling. "A marriage in name only?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Separate rooms. You run your house. I run mine. Partners. Nothing more." The door suddenly burst open. Annie ran in. "Mama, Mr. Crow's carriage is coming!" Ethan stood. Martha went pale. Silas Crow was arriving. And Martha now had to decide if she would marry a man she barely knew or lose everything. Silas Crow's black carriage rolled toward the house through the falling snow, the wheels cutting deep lines in the white ground. Martha's breath shook as she watched him approach. Ethan gently stepped in front of her. "Take Annie upstairs," he said softly. Martha hesitated, but Annie tugged her sleeve, frightened. Together they hurried up the stairs just as Crow's fist pounded hard against the door. Ethan opened it. Silas Crow stood there, wrapped in an expensive coat, snow melting on his polished boots. Two rough-looking men stood behind him. "Cole," Crow said with a sharp smile, "didn't expect to find you here, paying your respects to the widow?" "Something like that," Ethan replied calmly. Crow's eyes slid past Ethan toward the kitchen. "Mrs. Lane, I trust you're ready to accept my offer. Time's running out." "The lady's not interested," Ethan said. Crow's smile twitched. "The lady can speak for herself." Ethan didn't move. Crow had to stop or run straight into him. "We have an understanding," Ethan said. "What kind of understanding?" Crow asked. "The kind that isn't your business." A long, tense moment passed. Snowflakes melted on Crow's hat brim. His pale eyes narrowed, reading the situation. Then his smile returned, colder, sharper. "You have 3 days before the loan comes due. I doubt your understanding will save her." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day." Ethan shut the door, and Martha came downstairs, trembling. 3 days, she whispered. "Then we move fast," Ethan said, "if you agree." She looked at him with fear, pride, grief, and a spark of hope all mixed together. "All right," she whispered. "We'll do it." The next morning the storm had passed. The world outside sparkled under a sheet of white. Ethan returned at sunrise to find Martha's bags packed. "You're leaving?" he asked, startled. "I'm going to town," she said firmly, "to get married." Ethan let out a slow breath of relief. "You're sure?" quote. "No," she said honestly, "but it's the only way." They loaded Annie onto the wagon and began the rough ride to Sweetwater. Annie sat between them, bundled tight. She asked simple questions, questions that made Martha's heart ache. "Mr. Cole, do you like cats?" "I do." "Will you teach me to rope cattle?" "I will." "Does getting married hurt?" Ethan choked on air, and Martha almost laughed for the first time in months. They reached town by mid-morning, snow piled on rooftops, smoke rising in gentle curls above chimneys. Martha took Ethan's arm. "Before we go in, there's something you need to know." "What is it?" he asked. "Tom found copper signs near the creek last year," she said quietly. "He never had money to confirm it, but if there's copper there, this land is worth far more than Crow knows." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we protect it. More reason to hurry." Inside the courthouse stood Judge Patterson, a kind older man with wise eyes. He glanced at the pair and raised an eyebrow. "Marriage license," he said, "bit early in the day for romance." "It's a practical arrangement," Ethan said. "Mrs. Lane needs protection for her property." "Very well," the judge said, though he clearly suspected there was more to the story. They stood side by side as he read the vows. Martha's hands trembled. Ethan's voice was steady and deep. When the judge declared them husband and wife, Martha felt something shift inside her, something warm, something dangerous. "You may kiss your bride," the judge said lightly. Ethan gave her a gentle kiss on the cheek. It was simple, respectful, but it made her heart flutter more than she expected. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Cole," Judge Patterson said. "May you find more than you bargained for." Outside, they barely reached the wagon before trouble appeared. Silas Crow stood across the street, fury burning in his pale eyes. With him stood 2 of his hired guns. "Well, well," Crow sneered. The grieving widow certainly moved on fast. Ethan stepped forward, but Martha gripped his arm. "He wants to bait you," she whispered. Crow continued, "Tell me, Cole, how much did she cost you? Or did she throw herself at the first man with pockets deep enough?" Martha's face burned with humiliation. "That's enough," Ethan said, voice low with warning. Crow ignored him. "The whole town knows what this is, a fake marriage to avoid debts. The judge will hear of it." Martha faced him squarely, her voice steady. "My debts will be paid in full by week's end, and any further business you have is with my husband." Crow's smile vanished. "You think you've won. This land is mine, and accidents happen on lonely farms." Ethan stepped forward, his voice like steel. "And a man who threatens women and children should think carefully about his own safety." Crow paled but turned away, muttering threats. Annie tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Mr. Cole, are you going to be my new papa now?" Ethan knelt beside her, softening. "That's something your mama decides, little one, but I'll take care of you both. That's a promise." Martha's throat tightened. She wasn't ready to call him papa, but she knew he meant every word. As the wagon rolled back toward home, Annie happily chattered, while Martha looked sideways at her new husband. What started as a desperate deal now felt different. Stronger, more dangerous, more hopeful. Far from over. The first week of their new marriage passed with strange quiet. Ethan slept in the small room off the kitchen. Martha slept upstairs. Annie moved between them with ease, but the adults walked carefully around each other, unsure where boundaries truly lay. Ethan worked from dawn to dusk, repairing everything Tom had left unfinished. Martha cooked breakfast early each morning, leaving it on the table before taking Annie outside. They rarely sat together, but they were beginning to understand each other's rhythms, each other's grief. One night, Ethan stayed after supper to mend a harness by lamplight. Annie sat nearby, practicing her letters, while Martha folded laundry. Martha caught herself watching him more than once. The quiet strength in his hands. The calm way he explained anything Annie asked. He wasn't Tom. He didn't fill rooms with laughter or wild dreams. Ethan filled them with steadiness. Then trouble found them, late one dark, moonless night. Ethan snapped awake at the sound of cattle bawling in distress. He moved fast, pulling on boots and grabbing his rifle. One look out the window told him everything. "Someone's at the pen," he whispered. "Martha, get Annie. Hide in the root cellar." But Martha wasn't the hiding type. Minutes later, she was beside him outside, shotgun in hand, shawl tight around her shoulders. "There are 3 men," Ethan whispered. "They're opening the gate." "Then they won't leave with our cattle," she whispered back. The wind carried the men's voices. Ethan stepped out first. "That's far enough, boys." The men froze. Then one cursed. "Should have known you'd be sniffing around, Cole," Pritchard growled. "This is my land," Ethan said. "Step away from that gate." "We outnumber you," another man said. "2 guns," Martha said firmly, stepping into view. "And I don't miss in the dark." The standoff broke when one of the men jerked for his pistol. Ethan fired a warning shot inches above his head. Martha fired too, the blast booming across the night, sending the men scrambling for their horses. They fled into the darkness, shouting curses behind them. When the danger passed, Martha's hands began to shake. "I've never shot at a man before," she whispered. "You protected your family," Ethan said gently. "You did just fine." Back inside, they sat at the kitchen table with warm coffee as dawn crept in. For the first time, Ethan noticed how tired Martha truly was, how she carried fear and responsibility like a weight on her chest. "We can't keep living like this," she said. "Crow won't stop." "No," Ethan agreed, "but neither will we." She looked at him then, really looked. And something unspoken passed between them, something that had been growing stronger with each shared worry and each quiet moment. That morning, Annie wandered downstairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why is the shotgun on the table?" she asked. "Just coyotes," Martha said quickly. Mr. Cole scared them off. Annie accepted this easily. Then she asked the question that froze both adults. "Mr. Cole, are you my papa now?" This time, Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll take care of you," he said softly. "Always. That's a promise." Annie smiled in a way that made Martha's chest ache with emotion. Spring came slowly, but it changed everything. Ethan taught Annie to guide the plow horse. Martha watched them through the kitchen window and felt a happiness she'd forgotten was possible. Their routine no longer felt awkward. Ethan joined them for dinner each night. He read to Annie. He talked softly with Martha on the porch after the child went to bed. Feelings grew, quietly, gently, impossibly. But Crow wasn't done. A messenger arrived, a sharp-faced woman named Julia Harrison. She came with a warning wrapped in poison. "Mrs. Cole," she said, handing Martha a folded newspaper clipping, "ask your husband about Kansas, about the woman he killed." The words hit Martha like rocks. When Ethan returned home, she held out the clipping with trembling hands. "Is it true?" she whispered. His expression changed, tightening with old pain. "Yes," he said, "but not how that paper says." He told her everything, about Elizabeth, about the struggle, about the accident that haunted him. Martha listened, her heart torn between fear and trust. "I should have told you sooner," he said, "but I was afraid you'd see me like they did." Martha stepped closer. "You've never given me reason to fear you," she said, "and I won't start now. But no more secrets." "No more secrets," he promised. Their bond strengthened, not weakened, by the truth. But the real blow came when they returned from a short cattle drive to find railroad survey markers on their land. Crow had filed mining claims. He challenged their marriage as fraud. If the judge agreed, Martha would lose everything. The courtroom filled with neighbors, gossips, and Crow's hired witnesses. People testified that Ethan lived in the barn, that Martha said theirs was only a business marriage. Crow's lawyer argued loudly that the marriage was fake. Then Ethan stood. He didn't speak like a lawyer. He spoke like a man with everything to lose. "Yes, it started as convenience," he said. "But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with my wife." A hush fell over the court as he spoke of Annie, of long nights protecting them, of caring for the land as if it were his own. Martha rose next, her hands slipping into Ethan's. "What began as desperation became the best thing that ever happened to us," she told the judge. "This marriage is real." Judge Patterson studied them for a long moment. Then he struck his gavel. "The marriage stands." Martha sagged with relief. Annie cheered. Ethan caught Martha before she fell, holding her close. Crow's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he spat. But it was. Days later, Crow was arrested. His crimes, threats, and bribes fully exposed. The town came together to help rebuild the hayfield he burned. Neighbors brought lumber, tools, and strong hands. Annie placed wildflowers in Ethan's hat and called him Papa without hesitation. And one warm spring night on the porch, Martha took Ethan's hand. "I don't want a marriage of convenience," she whispered. "I want a real one, with you." Ethan touched her cheek. "I've been yours since the day I walked through your door." Their kiss was slow and certain, two hearts finding home. The land was safe. Crow was gone. Their marriage was real. And as Annie laughed in the yard, picking wildflowers under the warm Montana sun, Martha realized she'd fallen in love with the man who married her to save her land and ended up saving her heart instead.